Hello everyone, welcome back to Aurelia in City Skylines. Last time we worked on the big detailed plaza where we did some crazy things with customizing buildings to exactly fit the shapes we needed, and we also created a new train station with trams running below it. And then we expanded the overall area, put some buildings on the waterfront and also some light industry around the highway interchange nearby. Today, we will work more on the waterfront. We will finish the last part of the very first canal that we built in the city, and now it's finally going to connect to this upper lake. We are also going to build lots of fancy big buildings on the waterfront and revisit the quay on the edge of the lake to make it much better looking. Let's go. Okay, and we are going to start with that canal. So this canal that I'm copy-pasting in here, you could have seen that a really long time ago. I think that was the third level. This first canal is actually going to have, I think, 4 levels, but those first 3 we built so long time ago that I don't even remember it mostly. And most of these places that we are going to be connecting to are actually not really all that detailed, and maybe detailed like weirdly from back in the day. So it's going to be quite interesting to blend it all together. But we're also on the edge of the crater, which was detailed already sometimes a bit more. But overall, it's just going to be kind of difficult to get it working together. And as you can see, I'm also going to be doing, especially over here, deleting some of the old detailing, some of the old elements, because I only built them on these sides, not really thinking too much about it, but they're not really going to fit with what I have in mind. So I just copy pasted the canal because I really wanted to get the same curvature, and I really wanted to have some sort of a different shape where this canal is going to enter the upper lake. So from the previous episode and even from the dome episode, we did that quay, which was going super straight along the edge of the lake. But over here where the canal is going to enter the lake, it's, or the other way around, obviously, then there's going to be just this different place, because it's just going to look much better that way, and it's going to allow us to do some more detailing. I'm going to try to create these, I'm not really sure how to call them, like little plazas maybe on the quay, so little bumps, so that it's not going to be completely straight, and there are going to be some statues or some interesting buildings and details, so that overall it's just going to look much more interesting. So I'm going to start, for example, with this corner on the very intake of the canal, right? So this is the obelisk by Armesto, I think. I already had this statue, I guess, obelisk, yeah, monument, since forever. It's kind of an old building by this point, but I never really found any good place for it. But this is absolutely perfect because I can just match it to the shape of the quay, and I'm obviously using as well some not procedural objects, but node controller for these keys, so I can really manipulate the shape much better, and I can really fit it so that it's going to copy the edge and the railing on the side of that monument. So it's just, looking like it's very natural in that position. As you can see, I have a couple of buildings placed here and there that I never really showed how I placed them, but that's because they are just testing buildings. I was just placing some random stuff here and there and seeing how it might look in some of these, either these quay plazas or maybe inside of these roads, because that was kind of the common theme of this particular project that I'm doing today. And I was really struggling to find the buildings that I want to place on the waterfront, because we are already in the point of the series where I placed pretty much every single good looking building. So I'm either forced to recycle some of them or just really, get to the bottom of just the collection that I have, or, the buildings that I have at my disposal in Find It, or, unique buildings mostly. Also, that's another thing. Like lately, I've been placing only the unique buildings that, are just unique buildings in the game. And I was really making sure that most of these big fancy buildings are either offices or, residential, commercial, using the Rico mod. So they actually serve some purpose, because as you may know, I banned tourists entering the city because I just don't like how they look, with their bright colors and sandals and socks and everything. And, pocket cars mostly. That's the main reason. So these unique buildings were not really serving any purpose. So I decided to make them into offices. And as you can see, it's kind of needed because we do have very high office demand, or, industry demand, office demand. But we are already done with the big industry, so all that's left are some offices. And since we are nearing the end of the series and we are nearing the end of the buildable areas in the city, I kind of need to start thinking about these kinds of balances. And as you can see, I do have this very high demand for the offices, so I need to make sure that the big buildings that I'm placing are actually going to be offices. So the city kind of works. Also, as you can see, we already have 200,000 inhabitants in the city. So that's kind of nice. I don't really want to go any higher than that because, again, I could just slap a whole bunch of residential buildings here and there, but I can't really afford to because we would then have very high unemployment, which at this point I think was pretty high, around 15% or something like that. But I managed to cut that down quite a lot by doing these like office parks. This waterfront in general is going to be very office heavy. There are going to be some blocks with residential, but it's mostly going to be offices. But mostly offices. Also some commercial here and there, but not that many. Anyway, while I was talking about that, I was using heavily the network multi-tool on the quays on the side of the lake because I'm basically these days using the network multi-tool mostly on the decorative networks, even on some roads here and there, but Aurelia is kind of done with the infrastructure almost. So the decorative networks are just so much better looking, especially like long twisty ones if you use the network multi-tool on them. So quays are super perfect example of that because you can just make them so much interesting and you can maintain the radii values. You can just play around with the circles and the centers of the circles and just, kind of do like a composition of that before actually committing into building it. And you can just drag it all around. It's just so much better. And you can maintain some consistency with how it looks, mostly because of the similar, or not similar, but exactly the same radii values. So it's just great. I was using that quite a lot. I'm only showing you the finished results in here, but I was highly experimenting with all of these different shapes in there, especially the bumps on the side of the intake to the canal, right? Those I was really making sure that they are going to look really good with the network multi-tool. And eventually I think it worked. And network multi-tool is not just for roads and railways, even though in there it's also super powerful. You're probably going to see that in Altengrad in coming episodes as well, or maybe I already showed that. I'm not really sure when this one is going to air, but for decorative networks, it's also absolutely amazing. Probably would have sufficed if I just said it one time, but it's just so great that, I need to repeat it. Anyway, I'm now going to do some kind of residential area around this canal. Again, just like in the beginning I mentioned, I was really struggling with finding the correct buildings for these kinds of places, but also like general ideas about how to continue these blocks and, how to shape them and things like that. But eventually it became clear when I was just doing like one road, then it became apparent how I need to do another road, and slowly but surely I was making this place finally complete. So as you can see, I'm also connecting to the old infrastructure near the crater, for example, and there were a couple of roads and buildings that were just not exactly matching, so I was also doing some slight changes there. As I mentioned many times before, I don't really want to revisit old areas to do like super extensive changes. The only exemption from that probably might be the main railway station, but that's also because it was not finished like at all. So, that's kind of fair. But no, I don't really want to revisit the already built areas. So there might be like a visible gap in like detailing or something like that. But probably not because I'm trying to blend it all together. Anyway, I also decided to just really use all these like super big footprint buildings that I already, or that I didn't place yet in the city anywhere else, because I was always thinking that I'm just going to find the right place for these huge buildings, like super unique buildings in front of some plazas, maybe like really distinct plazas. But it really occurred to me finally in this episode or this project that we are nearing the end of the series And I'm most probably not really going to find those ideal places for these buildings. So might as well just start, burning through them. So that's exactly what I did with that very big building right there. I'm not really sure what it's called. I think it's a real life building actually, or maybe it's not, I don't know. And it just filled like a huge block in there. It's not really that tall, which is perfect for this area. I don't really want to have super tall skyscrapers in here, but I do want to have like fancy buildings on the waterfront, because where else am I supposed to put them, right? The waterfront is perfect for that. Now, when I was doing that, I was also kind of looking at this interchange, the corner of this interchange, and how it was just not complete. I was thinking of maybe doing something different in this quarter of it, in this corner, but then I just decided, you know what, let's just continue doing this industry, because it was looking okay the last time we did it in the last episode, and I think I still had some ideas like what to do here and there, and this is like a sunken area on the side of those skyscrapers in this like a not so great shape, so doing some kind of big skyscrapers in here or something would not really work anyway, so the industry was the best choice. Now we also have these really odd shapes between the roads, between the highway roads, so we are just going to fill that with some retaining walls that are going to have some like weathered asphalt on the top, which might look like some kind of a roof with like ACs or all kinds of equipment. So there's probably some kind of buildings below this, some kind of warehouses or like, I don't know, like AC buildings, some kind of electrical buildings, maybe something like that. Just part of the industry, part of the overall service of this city block perhaps, or something like that. But these kinds of places around the highways just feel perfect for that, even though we are in, well, not really the downtown, but like, almost downtown area. So we should not really waste that much space. But I just like these kinds of, details here and there in between the tall buildings and the big buildings and, the high density. So that's also the case for these kinds of little cutouts between the roads, the ramps for the highway interchange. So I was trying to be consistent because this detailing, these kinds of planters and the elevator actually as well, that's something that I built on the other side of the interchange as well, like 2 years ago maybe. So I was just trying to be consistent with the detailing that I did before, and it's just, starting to look really, really good. It kind of occurred to me that since I was doing the other side of that interchange so long time ago, I really wonder what was I thinking back in the day, like how is this place going to look? And I can actually already reveal that I got the idea for, because I still do have all the videos from Aurelia, or 100 and something videos, and I decided to actually use all of them and do like a supercut of the end cinematics, only a couple of cinematics from each episode, and it's just going to show us the journey of the entire city. And when I was just quickly editing like the first cut of that, I noticed that some of these areas were just looking really weird when they were completely alone, when I was just first building them. And especially, for example, this interchange, it's actually really old. It's even older than I thought. I thought it's like episode 30, 40 or something like that. But actually, no, I don't exactly remember the number, but it's like 15 or something. So it's really, really old. It's really early, right? Because, we were building from the main train station and kind of following this canal all the way to the top. And this interchange was basically the end of the canal project of that time. Then I just decided I don't want to continue with that anymore. And here we are, mostly like 2 years after that, and we are actually completing this interchange, mostly using the same elements as before, and even doing the canal, doing the waterfront, blending everything together. It's just a good feeling, kind of, not so great because it's going to end, obviously, in a couple of episodes, couple of weeks, months maybe, but still, the feeling that it's finally being finished, that's kind of great. Anyway, we are now going to go back to the last level of this canal. I'm going to do some detailing and maybe then add some more buildings on the opposite side. So I was trying to do something different for this canal, because back when I was doing, for example, the canal next to the library, I was using the same old techniques. I was just using the pedestrian paths as the edges of it, and some kind of like very common details, as I always do. But in this case, I decided to also play with some elevation, so I also used these rocks because I really like these kinds of rocks. So I placed them on one side of the canal. We also need to do some kind of transition between this level and the level below it, the original level. So I just decided to copy paste these kinds of really narrow buildings, make them go side by side, just like we had on the other side. So it's again like using elements from before and doing this kind of end of the canal. I'm then going to use procedural objects to put some kind of like obviously fake outlets for the water or something like that, intakes maybe into the lower part. And then we're also going to do some creeping vines on the edge in here and really make it look more natural and more green, and all these kinds of retaining walls to just hide some edges and these kinds of details. As you can see, I'm also using some of the decorative networks. This one up here, the concrete beam, the darker one, that was made by CityWall, because when I was doing this project, I recently did that tutorial for the bridges, I think. So that's why I have all of these networks that I'm actually going to be using even in the next episode, because I really, really do like them. It's kind of amazing that I didn't notice them earlier, because I would definitely use them a lot more. So this was exactly what I was talking about. I was just experimenting with some buildings because I wasn't really sure about these kinds of places. So you can see me just delete some of the rough cuts or trials of positions of some of these. Now, I think that this particular building that I'm placing here, I'm not really sure if the taller or the shorter version. One of them I had for some time already, but the other one I got recently, and this got me this idea that I could just, put them side by side and create some kind of a residential block with the same style. So exactly in here. I got rid of that road because it was kind of boring. It was just creating some sort of a grid there. Well, not really like 90-degree corners, but a grid nonetheless. And I just decided to put this twisting pedestrian path only in here, and then I'm just going to make it more green. This is also something that I recently showed you in that node controller this time tutorial, when I'm just basically extracting the railing from one side of this pedestrian path, because I obviously don't need it on the other side, because I'm trying to create some kind of like a viewing area, like a platform, little tiny plaza on the side of that big stone pedestrian path. And then I'm just going to put some kind of benches in here, and it's going to look really nice. And as you can see, obviously, also I want to have this technique in here because it's kind of like a continuation of the railing of the actual boardwalk, the wooden pedestrian path, right? So this is looking really, really good. If you zoom in like super close, then you can see that the altered path railing is kind of like also slightly angled down, but that's kind of to be expected because it's the same model. But from this distance even, it's looking absolutely fine, and the same continuation is obviously what matters. So that's nice. Now I'm just going to fill, like I said, this place with trees. I think that I converted most of these residential buildings into PO simply because they had some details on the ground as well, and they had the road entrances a bit weird. So I think that later I put the service cubes inside these buildings and actually made them into residential to just get some foot traffic on these pedestrian paths. And even people who are not living in these buildings are going to use this path because these kinds of connections are just connecting like different blocks, different kinds of districts together. This is actually something that I talked about recently on the stream when people ask me why I don't have that many vehicles on the streets. And it's actually mostly, now that I think about it, it's actually mostly because Aurelia has a lot of walk-in options. Like the city is very walkable, and it's actually really inconvenient for people to drive vehicles because of the connections between different levels and different districts even. There are not that many connections to highways, for example, and things like that, but there are many more connections for pedestrians, all these kinds of elevators, paths, and everything. Also, there are a lot of bans for personal vehicles, especially on the actual pedestrian roads, those white roads, but even some other roads have bans, so it's really inconvenient to just drive on a straight line through the city, right? It's almost impossible. So it's much easier to just walk, which is like kind of encouraged by design. but also to take public transport, even though Aurelia definitely heavily favors walking. So I'm probably going to get into this topic in some future video, because I am planning on doing some kind of like a public transport overview or traffic overview maybe as well, and we're probably going to go into more details there. But it's just something that occurred to me now, because we are also doing another one of these like walkable projects, because obviously the canal is almost impossible to cross with a car except for the edges, but there are many more ways that people can cross the canal. So if they just want to go straight across it, it's just going to be so much shorter for walking. And that's obviously how the pathfinding works in City Skylines as well. So people are just going to take it. And since I'm also, well, I am using the life cycle rebalance mod, and there is that traffic probability something, but I have it turned off for Aurelia, and the reason for that is I need to have it turned on for Altengrad, but the mod doesn't remember different settings for different saves, and I really do need to have it in Altengrad, because there I'm using it to make sure that people don't drive cars all that often, because it's just going to look kind of weird in the 1930s. But then I need to turn it off for Aurelia, because I would have to just rework all of those probabilities, and I don't really want to, because I'm lazy. So I just turn it off for Aurelia. So basically now we have the vanilla probabilities, and still we don't really have traffic problems. I think that the traffic situation in Aurelia is like 90 or something, 90%, which is not like super high, but we don't have any problems, except maybe when I like bad word, but when I build like huge residential districts, then yeah, sure, people are just going to move into the city all at once, and it's going to block the highways. But apart from that, it's all absolutely fine, mostly because people are just walking through the city. Anyway, enough about that. Let's just more focus on what I'm building over here. So you could have seen me actually just try different kinds of buildings in this area, and those were mostly like really unique buildings. You could have seen me, for example, do that I think Chinese high school building. I'm not really sure. Maybe it's a university. I'm not sure. The red building, kind of L-shaped red big building. I'm going to place it in the next episode, I think, because it's really unique, and I really wanted to have it on the waterfront, but it wasn't really all that good in here. I decided instead to use the Grimaldi Forum building in there, which is really short, but it's kind of working there because it's going to be overshadowed by all the taller buildings around it, and those are mostly residential, and I really wanted to provide some view over the lake for those residential buildings. So it wouldn't make sense if I put some kind of huge tall office on the waterfront itself, because the buildings then would be completely hidden behind it, right? So this kind of works best, and you could have seen me just put those towers there and put them in the block kind of randomly, and just put the like fake pavement paths towards them. So that's looking okay. I was also asked why am I not doing any kind of like parking or whatever, so that's why I did that entrance underground on the side of that other block next to the canal. So it's again just like a fake entrance into underground, just like a dead end road, but it's a decoration. It's just looking like there is some kind of entrance into underground garages. Now this part that I'm doing here, this is something that I'm actually really proud of. So you could have seen me in the beginning actually do this kind of key differently with the network multi-tool, like I said, but then I decided to just use these curbs. They are called curbs, but they are planters, obviously, planter networks, and I'm just creating these kinds of shapes over here. At first I started here. This is the Soviet Research Center building, something like that. I'm just using it as a decoration on this plaza, let's call it. And then I did like a first cut of these planters. I wasn't really satisfied with it. I wasn't really sure what kind of shapes I'm aiming for, but then I just reworked it, did it like this. Oh yeah, and I also used this building as basically a planter itself. I decided to use those gum trees, I think, and because I haven't used them anywhere else in the city, so they're kind of looking very unique there, and it's looking cool. It's just like a big pot with flowers or something like that. And with the node controller, oh yeah, node controller is super powerful, as you can see, for the planters, because you can do these very nice looking shapes. Anyway, that is going to be all. We are now going to see the transition. As you can see, the quay on the side of the lake improved a lot. It's now much more interesting. It's not just straight. It's not copying the main avenue, and it's looking so much better. There's just something more there. And look at the high density. The high density is something that I'm really satisfied with. And in combination with the green around the canal, because I just placed those tower residential buildings kind of randomly in those blocks and just, trees and bushes all around them. So I'm really satisfied with that. And I was really trying to go for high density there because we have the medium density on this side of the city, closer to the dome. So there's that transition that I was talking about in the last episode. And yeah, these kinds of shapes with the planters, I'm really satisfied with those. The node controller is just amazing. You can see that I also use node controller on the quay itself. Made it wider on when it's going closer to the avenue. There I made it wider, and on some kind of transitions as well and things like that. And especially the curbs though. The curbs are really where it shines. Now, this is the residential part near the canal. As you can see, there are those like viewing areas or sitting areas, the tiny little plazas on the sides of those pedestrian paths. Those are also looking really good. And you could have seen a lot of people actually walking on those pedestrian paths already. Now, this is kind of the view of the heights in this area. Obviously, that big footprint building is the tallest, but it's nothing compared to the actual tall buildings in that financial district on the other side of the downtown, pretty much next to the library that we did recently. And the dome on the side there of the lake is actually looking kind of tiny from this view. So that's kind of interesting that it eventually turned out looking this way. Also, the highway interchange in this area is finally completed. I really wonder if when I'm going to make that supercut episode that I talked about, how this is going to look like. Because the highway, when it was just completely alone in the grass, it was just something completely different. And it's just strange looking at it now when it's finally complete. But it is. So that's what's great about it. Anyway, guys, that is going to be all for this episode. In the next one, I was thinking that I'm actually going to put together another first-person ride, this time from the train. It's going to go from the island city into the main station and maybe some other lines as well I'm going to put into a single episode. And then, after that, we are going to do the last building project in the city, all right, in the entire series. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching. If you liked today's episode, you can always do the usual as putting thumbs up below the video, sharing the video, liking it, that's what I said, leaving a comment, and subscribing to the channel. And you can also become a channel member if you want to directly support me in what I do. Thanks again for watching, and big thanks to all the channel supporters. Thank you again, take care, and goodbye.